You're very welcome to tonight's session, our leadership masterclass called A Day in the Life, Lessons Learned. My name is Miriam O'Farrell and I am a program coordinator at the Institute of Leadership. And before I hand over to my colleague, Mr. Dermot O'Flynn, I'm going to give you a brief overview of RCSI and our offerings. Just to bring your attention to the Q&A section, you'll see it on the right-hand side of your screen. And if at any point throughout tonight's session you want to ask a question or post a comment, you can. Sorry, I think you lost me briefly there. And moving on to the next slide. So RCSI were founded in 1784 and our mission is to educate, nurture and discover for the benefit of human health. You'll see in the image on the right hand side of your screen the 4 key areas of our work, and at the centre of that, so at the core, is patient-centred care. In the orange strand you'll see the Institute of Leadership under postgraduate education. RCSI is making a difference worldwide. We have over 19,000 alumnus who are improving human health in 90 countries worldwide. We've international campuses in Bahrain, Dubai and Malaysia. And here in Ireland, we have a really diverse student population with students studying here from over 60 countries. So why study at RCSI? We're ranked among the top 2% of universities in the world rankings. We have a lot of experience in this area, having developed healthcare leaders for over 220 years. Our programs are accredited by the National University of Ireland. And we're a really student-centric university. Really, the student journey and experience is at the heart of our work and considered in all decision making. We have a hugely experienced faculty on board, and our programs are delivered over a part-time blended learning basis. This allows a lot of our students to continue with their work while pursuing a master's program or a professional diploma. And this year, in response to COVID-19, we are facilitating a number of programs in a digitally engaged format. Looking at the Institute of Leadership specifically, we were established in 2005. Since then, we have over 2,400 alumnus. At the moment, we have 25 full-time staff, and we also draw on a pool of over 50 adjunct faculty who are expert specialists in their field, and they support our programs. Looking at our student population, 63% of our students are female in our Ireland campus, and that goes up to 80% for our Dubai and Bahrain campuses. Over 900 research projects have been completed by our MSc students, and these projects have a real impact in the healthcare sector in Ireland and beyond. Our academic programs are all level 9 qualifications, and the programs highlighted in red are currently accepting applications for the autumn 2020 intake. The programs highlighted in blue are accepting applications for spring 2021. On the left-hand side, you'll see our MSc offerings. These programs are worth 90 credits and delivered over 2 years. On the right-hand side, you have our professional diplomas, and these programs are delivered over 1 year and are worth 30 credits. We also facilitate a number of executive development programs. We work with clients such as the HSE, the Bon Secours Health System, the National Maternity Hospital, and a core element of our executive development programs is co-design, where our clients work with us and identify initiatives or learning opportunities that would benefit workers in their service. These programs are aimed at aspiring leaders or people who are already well established in leadership roles and want to develop their capabilities further. We also facilitate after action reviews, and this allows healthcare professionals to analyse difficult situations they've encountered in their work. And most recently, we've looked at challenging scenarios in the context of COVID-19. We're currently accepting applications for some of our programs for 2020. If you do want any additional information, you can look at our website. It's rcsi.com/leadership. I'm now going to hand over to Mr. Dermot O'Flynn. Dermot is the Director of Professional Development and Corporate Training at the Institute of Leadership. Over to you, Dermot.
Good evening, Miriam. Thank you so much for your introduction and your overview of what we do at the RCSI. Can I say good evening to all of you who've come to join me on this journey, particularly to our colleagues in the Middle East and some of my colleagues in Africa. And of course, those of you who are in Dublin or Cork or anywhere in Ireland today, you're most welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you all this evening. I'm speaking to you from a small one-bed famine cottage close to Crosshaven in Cork, where the sun is shining this evening. I hope wherever you are that you have had a good, busy and interesting day, and now you have time to sit back and maybe learn one or two key points for yourselves. And hopefully you've got a cup of coffee, a cup of tea in your hand, or a glass of water to enjoy the session. In this first photograph, I have a sort of a range of people that over the last 3 to 4 years I've had engagement with. In that I've got a chance to work with them, or got a chance to teach with them, or actually teach them myself. And these people move from being surgeons to anaesthetists, to being physicians, to being SHOs, clinical nurse managers, pharmacists, who else, occupational therapists, physios, a whole range of people, and radiographers. However, 2 or 3 people stick out in my mind. One, the clinical medical unit, Jerry in the top left-hand corner. We've done 3 programs with them, remarkable set of people in the Defence Forces. More remarkable is probably Bruce, and Bruce in the left-hand corner is a surgeon based in Lusaka in Zambia, not the richest place in the world, but he's a remarkable job. He actually performed the first conjoint twins operation with his colleagues there, and you can see these 2 beautiful babies in his arm who have now been separated successfully, and they're doing very, very well. Not only is he a gifted surgeon, but he's also a gifted teacher. So he's able to transfer his knowledge, his skills, and his attitudes to his trainees. And he was a pleasure to work with on a Train the Trainer program a couple of years ago. On the top right-hand corner, this one represents Christina Noble and the street children of Vietnam. I had the chance with some of my colleagues to spend some time raising money for Christina Noble, but also meeting some of these wonderful children who have ideas, who have hopes, and she's given them the skills and the knowledge and the attitudes to actually step up and help themselves to be successful. So over the course of the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about some of those people and really some of the lessons I've learned from them along the way, and hopefully you'll pick up 1 or 2 messages that might be useful to you and that you can use maybe tomorrow or the next day. So my work has brought me over from Ireland across into the Middle East to Bahrain, Dubai, Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, where I've been very involved in teaching on master's programs, but also teaching on a range of our professional development programs across those countries. I've also had the great opportunity of working in 10 African countries with COSEXA, the College of Surgeons of Central East and South Africa, where we've been training surgeons to become clinical trainers. And my colleague, Professor Kieran O'Boyle and Dermot O'Flynn have been working on that program for quite a while with some great success along the way. And I actually escaped a couple of years ago to New Zealand to deliver a paper to pharmacy shooters there, because I've been very involved in Ireland in that sector. So again, I'll share some of my learnings from those trips along the way. So a question for you, what do these people have in common? Well, we have 6 people, all in their own field, are probably seen as world leaders. Nelson Mandela for his political experiences, Sir Bob Geldof for his humanitarian work, William Mayo, one of the Mayo brothers from the Mayo Clinic. We have Seamus Heaney, a very famous Irish poet. Probably the one that some of you might have struggled with was Louis Pasteur, famous for his pasteurization work and more, and the amazing force of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. So all of these people are famous. They're also world leaders. But more importantly, the institute I work for, the Royal College of Surgeons, recognized that they were bringing something to society, and that they were made honorary fellows. And what gave me a shiver up my spine is many years ago, but about 3 or 4 years ago now, I was speaking to a group in the old examination hall in the College of Surgeons, where all these people had received their actual fellowships, honorary fellowships. So quite for me and to reflect on that. So I think it's really important that all of those people had dreams, and Nelson Mandela puts it in a very simple way. Vision without reality is purely a dream. Vision with reality can change the world. So we all have dreams. It's the question how you transfer those into something practical that you're going to achieve for yourself. And never let people pour cold water on those dreams. If you believe in them, go with them and do it. So to support those dreams, I found that successful people that I've met in my career over the last couple of years are very good at goal setting. They set clear goals themselves of what they want to achieve, both in work, but also what they want to achieve family-wise, and entertainment, sports, etc. And what is very important, they actually write them down. They write them down, they talk about them, and they do something with them. And the big mistake we often make in life is that with New Year's Eve resolutions, we don't write them down, we don't talk about them, we don't share them. So it's really important. So a lot of you remember that word SMART: specific, measurable, agreed, realistic, and timed. Really important. And my students, I find, often find it difficult to write goals initially. But once I give them that format, they can see the benefit. And it's really interesting how you watch them grow and develop over that period of time. I've been a patient. I presume many of you have been patients. I have watched my family as patients. And it's a very vulnerable position to be in, particularly in this time of COVID. So I think you must always put the patient first in anything you're doing. So any service improvement, any technical improvement, and just like you and me, they're flesh and blood with feelings and emotions that must be managed carefully. And whether it be the care assistant, whether it be the porter on the front desk, whether it be the phlebotomist, the anaesthetist, the nurse, we all have responsibility for that moment we spend with our patients to do our best at all times and make them feel comfortable in that environment. So I think never forget that that's the reason we're here, is to actually deliver care to our patients. Treating everybody fairly is key as a manager. And I see this a lot when I go and work in hospitals. I see certain staff who are treated very fairly, and I see other staff who are not. And the people who treat very fairly tend to blossom and grow, and are encouraged to do their best. The people who are not treated fairly tend to react, revolt, or withdraw to themselves, and don't deliver the kind of care we need for our patients. However, fundamentally, I learned this many years previously in my first career as a hotel manager. My very first day as a training manager at the Burlington Hotel in Dublin, I met a porter called John. John was about late 50s, dungarees, big beard, mop on the floor. And he asked me who, and I said, "Oh, I'm Dermot O'Flynn. I'm a new training manager." And he looked at me. He said, "Remember one thing, son." He said, "It's nice to be nice and treat people fairly, always." And to this day, and I'm now 59 years of age, it still sticks in mind. Every time I have an interaction with somebody, subconsciously I'm saying to myself, "Am I treating this person fairly? Am I doing it correctly along the way?" So please, for all the staff you have reporting into you, all the colleagues who work beside you, above or below you, always consider to treat them fairly. Mistakes are inevitable. Should I go back 1 second here? So gratitude is very, very important. And Brian Tracy has a great, I suppose, quote. He says that develop an attitude of gratitude and give thanks for everything that happens to you. And interesting that we had a past president from America of the College of Surgeons speaking probably about 4 years ago. And he said one thing he always does at the end of a day's surgery is to say thank you and mean it. Thank you to the porters, thank you to the perfusionists, thank you to the nurses, to his regs, or in his case, residents, for the day's work being done. And he does that with meaning and feeling, using his body language, using his eye contact and tone of voice. And it's meant. And that's very, very important, because without those people, he couldn't get his job done, and his patient doesn't get the quality of care that's required. But for yourself, also recognize that when you finish your day, what are you grateful for that day? And they say there's a very clear link. Martin Seligman would say there's a very clear link. If you actually write those things down, it can be very impactful for you on how you think about the whole area of achievement and gratitude and success. So the whole planning is a key issue for us as managers. And it's amazing to find the number of plans you hear about in the Irish Health Service or the Middle Eastern Health Service or in Africa that have failed. And they've often failed because by failure to plan, you're planning your own failure. Napoleon puts it in a good way. He says that time spent on reconnaissance is seldom if ever wasted. So doing the preparation work, thinking out aloud, brainstorming the ideas, and including the people who are going to implement. Too often what you happen is that managers come up with these plans, but they never engage the staff in the planning process. And therefore they impose a plan which the staff know won't work in the first place. So if you're going to make a change in your surgical department, on your wards, in your administration area, sit down and say, who's this change going to affect? What's it going to improve? Who's going to be involved? Who's going to implement it? And get those people involved in the process. Because my experience is that the people on the front line often have a much greater insights than we consider they have. So ask those questions, the what, the why, the when, the how type questions in the planning process. If the planning is well done, there's a very high success rate that you'll have a good implementation. And that's very rewarding for all involved. John Brennan, who joined us about 5 years ago to give us a lecture on lessons in leadership, he had been the past CEO of the Jury's Hotel Group. Before that, he'd been senior vice president with the Four Seasons chain. And he said that cash is the auction of any healthcare organization. Actually, cash is the auction of any organization. Without the money, you can do nothing. So it's very, very important for those of us who are clinicians who really have always shied away from the money. We've got to ask ourselves, well, we need to find out how it works. Now, you don't need to be an accountant to do this, but you need to develop a relationship with your CFO, your Chief Financial Officer, or somebody in the finance department who can talk you through how the money gets spent in your area. Where is the allocation for capital costs? Where's the staff budget? Etc., etc. So we have to speak that language. So when you actually go up with an improvement and need to cost it correctly, you've done the costings right. Too many of my students on the diploma professional in clinical leadership, often when I see their first draft of their plans for a change, i.e. a business proposal, they really haven't thought about the money side at all. So I got to get to sit down and work out, well, what's going to happen? How many staff are involved? How many hours of meetings are involved? What materials are required? Etc., etc. And all of a sudden they realize there's 10 items they never even considered before. Now, if they were to go up to their CEO with a business plan and no figures, they'd just be thrown out immediately. So make sure, I would say, get close to your CFO, understand, have a coffee with them, understand how it works, and then when you need advice and help to put together a good business case, work with them, not against them. We can't work on our own. Nobody in the health service works in isolation, and if they do, they're not effective. So in real healthcare teams, it's incumbent that everybody is engaged, and there's that big word of trust. And we know from a previous lecture by Professor John West, there's very clear evidence from his research work that real teams that work effectively in healthcare, the NHS, produce better outcomes for their patients. But also they're more innovative, they have less stress levels, less sickness levels, etc. So there's a lot to be said for this. There's a great, I suppose, thing about synergy, where in a real team, it's not 2 + 2 = 4, but in a real team, 2 + 2 = 5, 6, or 7, that the sum of parts, you produce an awful lot more. And I suppose that's really recognized by this word of trust. And I love this photograph of the parachutists over Dubai a couple of years ago, where they had the largest ever parachute jump. And imagine the trust involved in the preparation, the planning and the preparation to get that right. And if you look about what's happened in COVID crisis, our teams have really jumped high to produce excellent levels of care, excellent outcomes, and work together to ensure that everything was done right. And the challenge I asked not one of my students, but one of our directors of nursing recently, how are you going to continue that when it comes to the winter crisis in the bed trolleys? How are we going to keep our teams that motivated, that engaged to come up with better solutions to the winter crisis we have coming up in November, December, January, and February? And that's a challenge for all of us listening to me tonight. People don't like change. Staff don't like change. Management adults don't like change. However, it's really, really important that if you just stagnate and do nothing, you die. And think about this for a second. The only constant in healthcare is change. If we didn't keep on having our scientists working alongside us, if you guys didn't keep on doing the research you're doing, we wouldn't be innovating, we wouldn't come up with new ideas, we wouldn't be improving. So we have to get on board the bus and welcome change along the way. And I think probably that the COVID crisis has helped us enormously to manage change, rapid change, and to get things achieved in a very short space of time. So with the word change, I would often call it, maybe because people don't like the word change, you might want to call it improvement. It's a gentler, soft word. We're looking at ways of improving. It's a constant journey of improvement along the way. But imagine this for a second. One of the surgeons I met who's pretty out at this stage, he started off in the Second World War as a surgeon, and his only medication that he could use was penicillin that had any real effect for recovery for his patients. But he retired at keyhole surgery. Now imagine for a second what change that surgeon went through over the course of his surgical life. So I asked that hard question, well, how do you do that? How do you go from penicillin on one side to keyhole surgery on the other side? And he said he said his philosophy was, you have to ask that question every day. How can you do it a little better tomorrow? And all of us are asking those questions in the healthcare sector. You start seeing real improvement taking place over a period of time. So at the end of the day, you say, well done today. Now, what small improvement can we make tomorrow that'll make so much so that person and his team of many great nurses and doctors and assistant surgeons, regs, etc., produced over 50 peer-reviewed papers in his career, and were recognized as a center of excellence at the time. And that's a challenge for all of us, to actually embrace the change and make the most of it, and bring people along and encourage them along the way. Some of us inherit people into teams, some of us have a choice, but it's really, really important to get the right people on the bus. And the right people are the people who say, I'm here to do my best. I'm here with the right attitude. However, I need some skills development or knowledge development, but I want to do the best I can. And your job as a great clinical leader is to actually have that in place. And I picked as a challenge for those of us who have rotating staff. So if I'm a consultant, a physician, or no matter what consultant I am, and every 6 months I have new people coming to join my team, it's really important that when they join, you set them up for success. So it's about onboarding them correctly, good induction, and mapping out for those 6 months to a year, what's the plan? What are they going to get from this rotation? What are you going to get? What are the patient going to get? So we're working together on this. And with the people you've inherited, you've got to sit down and explain your philosophy of how you like to work, how you like to get things done, and how you need to work with them effectively for the future success, both for themselves, for the department, and for the patients as well. And going along with that, we have the whole quality issue. I mean, quality, I think, is there's many, many definitions, and I quite like the very simple one that says that it's doing it right first time, every time. And it goes back to my childhood and my parents, anaesthetist and a surgeon. But we didn't have a washing machine, so you'd be doing the wash up at night time, and your mother would throw you back the dish or the plate and say, "Do it again, do it right first time." And she was absolutely right, because we're just duplicating the work. By not doing it right the first time, do it the second time. And the cost of quality is enormous. So the question which I ask you this evening is, when you look at what's your cost of quality when you don't do it right, and then look at what the real cost is and why it can be worthwhile doing. And quality is everybody's responsibility. It's not just the manager's responsibility or the anaesthetist or the surgeon. It's everybody has to have that inbuilt. We all take responsibility for that. And that comes very nicely then with the whole area of patient safety, is that we know that patient safety is everybody's responsibility from the time going to the hospital. It's not just about the medics. No, it's not just about the nurses. No, it's not just about the porters. No, it's everybody's responsibility. So if everybody is looking as a patient to where things might go wrong, then there's a great chance you're going to pick it up. So having that mindset to say, hold on a second, that's not in the right place. That's not happening today. We've got to change that. And being willing to do that. One of my worries when talking to young SHOs in physicians is that often they feel they can't put their head above the parapet because they want to get signed off and move on. And that's very worrying, because then what happens to them when they become the senior? Do they still ignore the issues? And that's a dilemma, a moral dilemma that they have to consider as a young doctor. Do I stand up and say, "Oh, no, something wrong here? Can we fix it now rather than later?" What I love about, when you look at other industries, they empower people to stop the production line if there's something wrong, because it's quicker to fix it now than later. So patient safety and quality are very much intertwined, and we all have responsibilities for that along the way. Some of my colleagues will know that I just love performance. I love the whole idea that people can perform, and I love the whole idea that we can develop people at the same time. And maybe I was very lucky that in one of my early careers that I had a manager who told me, "Dermot, we work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. That's X number of hours per year. However," he said, "you must take your 2 days off a week, and you must take your 4 weeks holidays a year. However, I will judge you and your team whether you're here or not." As a young manager, it became very clear to me very quickly that there were some very clear goals that I will agree with my manager, but also to achieve those goals, I'm going to obviously have to delegate to my team and let them know what my goals are as well to ensure success. And when you look at these people in this photograph here, you have call center staff, the most measured people in the world. Everything they do is tracked. They keep performance indicators, and that's there for a reason. We have our pilots sitting in the flight deck there. Again, everything they do is recorded in the black box. And the black box is not just used for, when something goes wrong, it's used to audit their performance, make sure they're actually flying the plane correctly, doing the right things. We have a sports person there, in that case, rugby there. They have their stats, all their key performance indicators at the end of a match, and they can match those against the goals they set with their coach beforehand. Again, clear evidence. And then we have healthcare. And in healthcare, some areas are very clear on what the goals and the key performance indicators are, and some aren't so clear. And I think it's something we have to challenge ourselves with. And interesting that our current CEO of the HSE, Paul, has said that's something he wants to focus on. He wants me to get us to focus on, one, what are those performance measures for staff to deliver on, but also to do that, what development do they actually need? And that's a space I'm really excited by, is that managing over 100,000 people and helping them put together really good performance plans for the benefit of the organizations that they work in, but also for developing themselves at the same time. But performance does matter, and having key indicators and clear goals really, really helps. If you don't have a mentor, I would strongly suggest you get one, because mentors are those special people that you can pick up the phone to and talk to and say, "I need to talk to you about something." And they are not your direct boss. They're somebody across the side of some of you. Maybe some of you have met along your career that you really liked and trusted. And most people, when they're asked to be a mentor, are quite delighted to take on the role. And it all depends what you want them to help you with. You may want them to help you with setting your goals. You may want to do some coaching with you. You may just want some clear guidance. You may want them to steer you in the right direction for training. You may just want to get them to pick you up it may be to share some of their knowledge, give you some support, and help you achieve success. In my experience, when I worked for myself, having a mentor was fantastic because I could go and see this person 4 or 5 times a year, have a coffee, and in this case, she would ask me the hard questions, and I would have to come up with some answers because working your own was very, very, I found difficult at times because you're just on your own. But having a mentor to guide you, say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? What would you do differently if you did that, etc., and be able to open doors maybe at times. Now, I know a lot of people in the surgical area, certainly I know have a lot of the senior regs I know would have mentors. I would know some physicians would do the same, but really important for the other professions as well, whether you're a nurse, whether you're a physiotherapist, whether you're a hospital administrator, is having that person you can have those conversations with becomes very, very helpful. So I would say that the successful people I've met in my journey through the hospital, I would say a very high percentage of them do have mentors that work very successfully for them. There are many, many great quotes about education. And I've been now involved in education probably for the last 20 years of my life, between working for the College of Surgeons and previous organizations. And I would say I just love this William Booth's 8th quote, says, education is not filling a bucket, but lighting a fire. And our job as educators of people and educators of the future in healthcare is to light a fire in their belly saying, we want to learn, we want to apply our knowledge, skills, and attitudes to be the best for our patients. And that really excites me because the day I'm not excited when I go to the classroom, the day I'm not excited when I go and do another day in the life, then I should stop doing this work because you have to be excited by transferring knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And it's incredibly rewarding. And I just look at this slide for a second. We have in the top right-hand corner is a group of surgeons we were training in Africa, in Uganda. And there's a lady in the back corner wearing a blue dress, and that's an extraordinary person. And she is the mother of surgery in Dr. Mora in Uganda. And she was there the first morning early. Now she is just, every one of those surgeons come in and basically genuflected and talked to her before we started. And it was so engaging. And she had such knowledge and wisdom. And she offered it up. We were there to teach, particularly how people make presentations and how to teach skills correctly and how to teach people how to get feedback correctly. But all the time she was helping and supporting us with all the knowledge she had as well. In the bottom left-hand corner, this is the future of where we are now. We've now transferred, during COVID, we've transferred from being an in-class training organization, should I say, within the Institute of Leadership, to now becoming a virtual. So overnight, we had to transfer all our learnings into a virtual environment. Boy, has that been challenging, yes, but also very, very rewarding. And it's actually starting to work for us, and students have come on board, and the reaction has been very, very positive. So that's my colleague Cathy Doyle and myself having a joint course running together. What's fantastic is our simulation centre in Stephen's Green in Dublin, where we now have a phenomenal centre, probably the biggest centre in Europe for surgical simulation. And there are all our trainees practicing before COVID started. And I suppose the reason why I'm involved in education, and I love it so much, is to see those smiling faces dancing down Stephen's Green when they've graduated, medicine or pharmacy or nursing or leadership, or whatever it's going to be, that we've had an impact on those people for a period of time. And now they're going to take their knowledge, skills, and attitudes and use them effectively in their careers going forward. And I always say to those people that, hopefully, if you do see me as a patient years to come, you remember me, and hopefully you look after me equally well. They say that feedback is a food of chance. And I always remember I was working in St. Thomas's Hospital with doing outpatients round with a plastic surgeon where he specialised in breast reconstruction after breast cancer. And we were walking on the corridor he was running two rooms, and his SBR came up with a question, and the consultant gave him the answer immediately. And I kind of said to him, why did you do that? He said, it's quicker. And I said, well, is that really good in the long term? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, if that SBR is going to improve, he needs to think about the answer himself and then give him feedback on what is wrong, what is right there. And people really grow and develop when you give them feedback for improvement when they've been successful, but also feedback for success. I should say feedback for success when they've been successful, and feedback for improvement when the areas for improvement take place. And there's many different models. And interesting, when you talk to Irish, particularly medical regs, SHOs, they say what they really lack, they don't get enough feedback. They crave for it, and that may be due to Generation Y. My colleague Dr. Mary Collins probably talks more about that in one of the later ones of this series. But really important that feedback is the food of champions. Do it quickly, don't put it off, and sit down and have those conversations. Really important. You need time out, you need time off, you need to manage your time. And lots of people I meet are very poor at this. And obviously there's time for work. There's time for downtime, which is a rest and sleep. And they say, it's a third. They say a third, a third, a third. A third for sleeping, a third for work, a third for doing other things. But it's really important to make sure the other things are worthwhile doing. And for some of you, that might mean just walking home after work. For others, it might mean going to the cinema. For others, it might be play a GA match or a rugby match. It might be going for dinner. Whatever it's going to be, but put some time aside for yourself. There's been a great phrase during this COVID crisis, look after yourself. Because if you can't look after yourself, how are you going to look after your patients when they really need you at most? So, and there's all sorts of ways of doing this. There's no magic formula to managing your time. You've got to decide what's the best use of your time right now. And this evening, you made that decision. The best use of time is to listen to me and hopefully pick up one or two tips that might be useful in the future. And tomorrow, you have some other priorities. But put some time aside for yourself. And whether that's just reading time, sitting, overlooking the sea, whatever it's going to be, but do it and do it now and create that little space for yourself. There's lots of good time management techniques. There's lots of courses on that. And find when that works for you. Personally works for me is I have a year's diary I can see in front of me. I have the whole year on one page. So that's the big picture. And then I go down by then certain dates I have to achieve things by. So in front of me in my desk at work, which haven't been there for a while, I just have a list of my key objectives for this year. And when I look up, if I'm not doing something that's related to those objectives, then probably I'm wasting my time and I should be doing something else instead. So keep that in mind. I've discovered certainly that reflect an incredibly powerful tool. And you reflect what you've learned today, yesterday, last month. And I started really encouraging trainees to, after a day's work, to actually just write down, whether it be in their Apple Mac or whether it be in their phone or on a piece of paper, notebook, what did you learn today and why will it be useful? Two very simple questions. What did you learn today and why would it be useful? Now, there's much more complex ways of doing reflection and many reflection grids you can use. But even doing that, it just captures the key things you've learned from the day that you can build on tomorrow. And I think it's about learning from today, what happened yesterday, and then last month. And you build up this repository of information that can be very useful to you in the future. And I find it very interesting. We decided to build this into our professional diploma in clinical leadership because actually it was really helpful to the students. It could allow them to actually solidify some key information by writing reflection using the Gibbs cycle. And I have to say, some of those reflections were, to me, really interesting to read because they're from the heart. They're not somebody else's theory being rewritten. It's actually themselves saying what have they learned from this experience, what are they going to do about it, and when they're going to do it for, etc. So do consider reflection at the end of the day. A few quick notes to yourself, very, very powerful. And finally, I think it's that just switch off. At the end of the day, you just need to switch off, whatever time that is at. This is an interesting photograph. This is taken in Lake Tanganyika. It's in Burundi, where myself and Professor Kira Boyle have been training a group of surgeons on teaching clinical skills, knowledge, and making presentations and giving feedback. And we were sat on the beach with them after the day. And to me, this is just our most relaxing time, a lovely switch off. However, one of the surgeons said to me, I thought it was very interesting. He says, what were the words he said to me at the time? This might look like an idyllic scene. He says, however, if you look to the left, there's two little dots. And those two little dots to your left of the middle of below the sun are the ears of a hippo. And he says, Dermot, you don't want to get in the way of a hippo who's heading out to feed on the grass for the evening. Because the hippopotamus are the largest killer of people in Africa. So they're the animal that kills the most people in Africa. So he says, no matter how calm things look, as a leader, you always got to be broad scanning, watching what's going on around you to ensure everything is as it seems. So on that note, I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Miriam. That's Miriam with the I, and I believe we have some questions coming up.
So Lucy Nugent just asked, how much of one's career is planned or is it luck?
Lucy, it has been planned for most of them because they end up going down a journey of which they end up being a senior specialist registrar. They go off and do further research, they become a consultant, and they stay at that position. I think for us, Lucy, in your case, in the whole area of management, of leadership, often some of the not planned opportunities arise along the journey, and we've got to make those decisions. Are we going to take that opportunity or not? So I would say that probably in the hospital leadership space, I'd say more of the hospital managers I met over the years, it has not been the original plan, but they've emerged into those positions and have done very well doing that. Thank you.
So another question was how to manage between getting the right people in the business and select the people with lower skills and higher potential and invest in them to be the future leader.
Well, I couldn't agree more that if you can find people with the right skill set and then you train them up for absolutely. So I often have this view in my mind that we select for attitude, train for skill. So by selecting people who actually want to deliver the best, who want to give a quality of care to our patients, who want to challenge themselves, they're the people I look for, and now they're open to all opportunities when it comes to training and develop them. So that lovely grid you get them where they're high performers is wonderful, but they're also real people that they have a great belief in both quality and quantity work, but also looking after their patients, looking after themselves, and looking after the people they work with. But it requires investment by those who manage those people to ensure that actually happens.
Okay, thanks for that, Dermot. So another person asked, the professional diploma, is it multidisciplinary and how important is that?
It's critical. I actually wouldn't run a program like the professional diploma clinic if it wasn't multidisciplinary, because that's what we work with. We don't work in silos any longer, and if we do, then we shouldn't be. So the great opportunity to have surgeons, physicians, senior nurse managers, clinical nurse managers, physiotherapists, hospital administrators, it's just a wonderful mix because you have real conversations. And actually, the learning is not just from myself, Mary Collins, and the rest of the lecturers. It's about the interaction of the people themselves. And it's wonderful to see that. And they learn so much. They don't realize some of the complicated factors in their different roles and why they do things a certain way. And actually knocks down a lot of barriers. So I'm very pro multidisciplinary type programs, particularly the professional diploma in clinical leadership.
I suppose we're getting loads of thank yous from people, but we've also got compliments on the beers. So,
yeah.
But I suppose I have another question. So you mentioned about how important the patient is and never forgetting them. Do you think PPE during this time and COVID will affect that relationship between kind of teams and the patient?
Yeah. I think it's been really, it's a question we asked some of our colleagues in one of the teaching hospitals in Dublin, and absolutely. So how do you get over, if you have to wear all the PPE, how do you get over that for your patients? Well, as it simply you may have seen is that people in big, bold and brilliant have their first name on their gowns. So when they come up to the patient see, that's Peter, that's Mary, that's Joan. And also being able to speak clearer. Obviously a little louder because the plastic does muffle your voice, and using that eye contact with your patient as well and with your colleagues. So absolutely, it has caused difficulties certainly for all of us. And I suppose Sir George Bernard Shaw said, the single biggest problem in communication is that the illusion is that has it taken place, and particularly PPE, has communication taken place because they have all these barriers to it. So you've even got to work harder on your body language. You've got to work harder with your eye contact. You've got to work harder on your voice to make sure it's being understood.
We have another question there. What's the best tools to keep everyone's mindful that they have to impact in every step in the patient journey?
Yeah, well, if I go back before I even got involved in healthcare, I was very involved as a hotel manager in my first career. And getting our staff to walk the journey of a paraplegic patient coming to stay in a hotel was absolutely amazing, a total opener to people's minds as to what are the problems this particular patient faces when they come to our institute. So the same for in the journey of a patient through hospital is taking that time out as a patient in a group and say, well, as a patient, we get out of our car at the car park or we get let off, we arrive into the porter's desk, what type of greeting do we get there? A nurse aide comes down and collects us, brings us up to our ward. We then meet the nurse in charge. And then the phlebotomist turns around. And each one of those people have an opportunity to do the right thing. And if they do the right thing, I'm going to have a very good experience from a professional service point of view. Obviously, I'm still awaiting the surgery and how obviously I expect excellence there as well. But each person has to say to himself, I'm going to take personal responsibility to ensure that I deliver the level of care to this patient as if they were my mother, brother, sister relation. And some people have that built in. It's innate. Other people have to learn that, but they can learn it and they can be very, very successful at it.
There's another question in here. Is there a benefit to having students from Ireland and Dubai, or across the world, I suppose, either? Are there global lessons to be learned?
It's interesting to say that we were reviewing a student last week from the Middle East, and we asked at the end of the day, said, is there anything you would change or do differently? And this person said, yes, because I now realize I forgot to do this, this, and this. However, I think it's really interesting from a cultural point of view because now Ireland has become multicultural, as has the Middle East where our students are. And learning to understand that is critical to our success because no longer are you just living and working in one country. An awful lot of people in the healthcare sector travel forwards and backwards to the States, Ireland to the Middle East, Africa, etc. So being made aware of other cultures, how other people think and do, is fascinating, and that's part of education, not just part about specific medical education, it's part of broadening your mind. So the whole idea of coming to a health science university like the RCSI is to broaden your mind and make you aware of there are other people out there that we work close with day to day. And I found it personally from my time, I lived in Bahrain for 3 years, it certainly broadened my mind to how to live and work in the Middle East. And I met so many fascinating people on that journey, and I still enjoy going back, either virtually go back to teach or examine, or actually flying back to teach the examine. So there's huge learning, and I think that's one of the strengths we have in the RCSI is that we have that multicultural element, which is key.
And I think that ties in with what you mentioned in your presentation earlier about asking the right questions, not only in your team, but I suppose internationally when you're working internationally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, question is really important, and always ask that question why. Particularly as a leader, when you arrive somewhere new, there's all these rules and regulations, but keep on asking the question, why are you doing it that way? And they say after you ask the 6th why question, you actually get to the root cause of what the issue is, and now you can start doing something about it. So I think never forget those famous questions. I had 6 honest working men. They taught me all I knew. What, why, when, where, and who. Rudyard Kipling. And they're wonderful open questions to ask because then you get a dialogue and you listen to what's being said to you, and then you can discuss and then do something.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important that we bring across in our courses in the Institute of Leadership is putting people into situations that they might not necessarily be in beforehand and prepping for these real life situations and being comfortable in uncertainty, which is such a relevant thing to be in this time.
It's interesting to say that because one of the case studies we used recently on the professional diploma in clinical leadership was all to do with telemedicine. And the success of rolling out telemedicine to communities. And it's interesting to see all of a sudden now how our clinicians are starting to feel comfortable with telemedicine during the COVID crisis. So that's another sort of a revolutionary change or improvement going to take place for our students in the future and our alumni members.
Yeah, absolutely. It's empowering, and to have that and be comfortable in that uncertainty is really empowering. We have one more question there. Of all that's happening with COVID, what's your one key message for us this evening?
I I would say look after yourself, because if you don't look after yourself, you won't be able to look after other people. And we have these people in our care at the moment that we must look after. And there's so much to learn. I think it'll be fascinating actually when we sit back to review this year or this 2 years. We've learned an awful lot. Myself and Tina Joyce, with some colleagues from Connolly Hospital, have done a very interesting 45-minute discussion on the learnings from a physician's point of view, from a clinical nurse manager's point of view, and from a director of nursing's point of view. And it's fascinating to hear those people talking. And always remember that you have to look after yourself in this situation, and in doing that, then you're going to look after your patients equally well. And it's not easy. Nobody said it was going to be easy, but what's really impressed me is how people have stood up to the plate and have volunteered and got engaged and have done amazing work. And that needs to be celebrated at some stage and recognized for what it is. So many thanks for all those questions. I'm going to leave you with a final thought. I hope you've enjoyed the session. I've enjoyed talking to you. If there's any further queries or questions, don't hesitate to contact me at doflynn@rcsi.ie. However, my final thought comes from Mark Twain, who has just so many clever quotes, and what a clever writer. And I particularly like this one, maybe because I like the outdoors and I like the water and the sea. 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the ones you did do. So what I encourage you to do is throw away the bowline, sail away from safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails. And most importantly, as a leader, explore, dream, discover. EDD, explore, dream, discover. Good night, thank you, be safe, have pleasant dreams, and hopefully we'll see you again shortly. Thank you.